The welcome basket smelled like lavender and lies. Mira lifted it from the check-in desk at Hollow Point Lodge, feeling the weight of artisan soap and locally sourced honey, gifts that said "we care" in a language she'd stopped trusting after the divorce. The hostess, name tag reading Bryn, smile reading "I'm paid to be warm," slid a second item across the pine counter, a manila folder. Mira's name printed across the tab in serif font, the kind you'd use for wedding invitations or eulogies. "Your family dropped this off yesterday," Bryn said. "They wanted to make sure you had everything." Mira tucked it under her arm alongside the basket. "That's thoughtful." "Sure. What could go wrong?" Her sister Jamie had booked this trip 3 weeks ago, wrapped it in the language of self-care and sisterly concern. "You've been through so much with the split. You deserve a weekend to just breathe." Todd, Jamie's husband, had chimed in during the phone call, his voice easy and confident. No cell service, no distractions, just you and nature. Mira had hesitated. She didn't like surprises, didn't like being managed. But Jamie had already paid the deposit, non-refundable, and refusing felt petty. So here she was. 38 years old, recently divorced, standing in a main lodge that smelled like cedar and good intentions. The cabin sat 50 yards from the main building, tucked among white pines that filtered the afternoon light into soft gold. Inside, everything was aggressively cozy. Knotted throw blankets, a wood-burning stove, a lake view framed by windows that didn't lock properly. Mira set the basket on the kitchenette counter and tossed her duffel onto the bed. Through the glass, a loon called, low and mournful, and she thought, "At least someone here is honest about how they feel." She unpacked slowly, hanging her clothes in the narrow closet, setting her toiletries on the bathroom shelf. The cabin had that rental smell, Pine Sol and someone else's detergent. On the nightstand sat a handwritten card on thick cardstock, "Welcome to Hollow Point. May you find the quiet you've been seeking." Mira turned it over. Nothing on the back. She set it down and noticed her hands were trembling slightly, a tremor she'd developed in the final months with Dan, when every conversation felt like walking through a room full of tripwires. She opened the folder expecting spa schedules, maybe a handwritten note from Jamie, something about gratitude and new beginnings. Instead, the first page was a declaration page from Granite State Life Insurance. Policyholder, Mira Hollins. Beneficiary, Jamie L. Reed. Face value, $1.2 million. The room tilted slightly, the way it had when Dan told her he'd been sleeping with his paralegal for 6 months. Mira sat on the edge of the bed, folder open across her knees, and read it again. The policy was dated 2 weeks ago. Premiums. Autodraft, monthly, from an account number she didn't recognize. Attached behind the declaration page was a medical examination form. Her signature at the bottom, except it wasn't her signature. It was close, confident, but the loop on the M was wrong. She flipped through the remaining pages. Policy terms. Riders. One rider in particular, highlighted in yellow. Accidental death pays double. Her hands went cold. For a moment she just sat there, staring at the highlighted text, trying to make it mean something other than what it obviously meant. Maybe Jamie had taken out a policy for both of them. Maybe this was some kind of estate planning thing their mother had suggested. Maybe the signature was a clerical error, a mix-up at the insurance office. But the account number at the bottom of the premium payment schedule, she recognized the bank. It was the credit union where Todd had worked before he quit to flip houses full-time. She called Jamie, voicemail, tried Todd. The message showed read within seconds, but no reply came. Mira stood, paced to the window, back to the bed, her actuary brain kicking in against her will. Policy inception. 14 days ago. Contestability period, 6 months. If she died within that window, accident, illness, anything, the insurance company would investigate. If she died after, they'd pay. Jamie and Todd's house, the fixer-upper they'd sunk everything into, was worth maybe $350. They'd been underwater for a year. She looked at the medical form again. The clinic name was in Portsmouth. She'd never been to Portsmouth, but Jamie had insisted on a sister day 3 weeks back, said she'd booked Mira a spa appointment, that Mira just needed to show up and relax. Mira had canceled. Work deadline, couldn't get away. Jamie had seemed annoyed, kept texting about rescheduling, then finally gave up. Now Mira understood why. They'd needed that medical exam to complete the application. The lodge brochure sat on the nightstand, glossy and full of promises. She flipped to the back. Note, cell service is limited to the main lodge area. Embrace the disconnection. Mira grabbed her phone. 1 bar. Enough to load a text maybe, but not a call. She opened her camera, photographed every page of the policy, the forged signature, the highlighted writer, the account information. No service to upload to cloud storage, but the images saved locally. She checked the date stamp on each photo. November 23rd, Friday, 4:15 p.m. She walked back to the main lodge, folder under her arm, pulse ticking in her throat. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, golden and warm, and a couple sat by the fireplace drinking wine. Everything looked so normal, so safe. Bryn looked up from her computer, same warm smile. Everything okay in the cabin? Perfect, Mira said. Quick question, who dropped this off? Your sister and her husband. They seemed so excited for you to have a restful weekend. Did they say anything else? Bryn's smile flickered, uncertain now. Just that you'd been going through a hard time, that you needed this. She paused. Is something wrong? Mira forced herself to smile back. No, just wondering. Hey, what's the nearest town? I might need to grab something I forgot. Bellport, about 40 minutes south. The shuttle runs twice a day, morning and evening. Bryn checked her watch. Last one left an hour ago. Next one's tomorrow at 8. Got it. Thanks. Mira walked back to the cabin slowly, counting her breaths, trying not to look like someone who just discovered her sister might be planning to kill her. She stopped halfway down the path and looked back at the lodge. Through the window, she could see Bryn on the phone now, gesturing slightly. Probably nothing. Probably just calling about dinner reservations, but Mira's skin prickled anyway. Back in the cabin, she locked the door and sat at the small table by the window. Outside, the light was fading, turning the lake into hammered silver. She opened her laptop, still had some battery left, and tried to connect to Wi-Fi, password protected. Of course. She closed the laptop and pulled out a legal pad from her work bag, started making notes. Facts, timeline, evidence. The things she could prove versus the things she suspected. Facts. Policy dated Nov 9, 2 weeks ago. Forged signature on medical exam. Jamie is sole beneficiary. Premium auto draft from account I don't own. Accidental death rider pays double. 2.4 mils. Jamie and Todd are in debt. Estimate $400K plus. Timeline. Octi 30. Jamie suggests sister spa day. Octi 31. I cancel due to work. Novi 2 to 5. Jamie texts repeatedly about rescheduling. Novi 9. Policy inception date. Novi 12. Jamie calls to offer birthday gift weekend. Novi 20. Jamie confirms retreat booking. Says already paid. Novi 23. I arrive. Find policy evidence. Photos of policy documents. Text messages showing Jamie's persistence. Need. Proof of medical exam without my presence. Need. Financial records showing motive. She stared at the list. In court, this would be circumstantial. A defense attorney would argue coincidence, misunderstanding, maybe even that Mira had consented and forgotten. She'd been stressed lately. The divorce had been ugly. Dan's lawyer had painted her as unstable during the settlement negotiations, prone to paranoia and irrational accusations. Jamie could use the same playbook. Her phone buzzed. Text from Jamie. Hope you're settling in. Let me know if you need anything. Love you. Mira's throat tightened. She typed back, all good. Thanks. Added a heart emoji because that's what the old Mira would have done, the sister who still believed in good intentions. Another text, this time from Todd. Jamie says you're not answering calls. Everything okay? Mira frowned. She'd only called once. Unless they were tracking her attempts somehow. She turned off her phone completely, removed the battery, paranoid maybe, but her paranoia was starting to feel justified. Night came fast in the woods, and with it the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful so much as waiting. Mira sat at the small table by the window, the insurance folder open in front of her, and tried to think like an actuary instead of a sister. Risk assessment? Probability. Jamie had always been impulsive, prone to magical thinking. We'll flip the house and make 6 figures easy. But this was different. This was premeditation. The forged signature, the medical exam. The timing of this trip, isolated, no witnesses she knew. She replayed the last month in her head. Jamie's sudden attentiveness after years of polite distance. The texts checking in on Mira's health. You eating okay? Sleeping? Todd's odd question during a barbecue in early November. You still running? No knee problems or anything? At the time, she thought he was making small talk. Now she wondered if he'd been checking her insurability, making sure she didn't have any pre-existing conditions that would flag the application. And then there was the barbecue itself. Mira had arrived early, found Jamie and Todd in the kitchen having what looked like an argument. They'd gone silent when she walked in. Jamie had smiled too quickly, asked about Mira's drive. Todd had left the room. At the time, Mira had assumed it was the usual marital tension, money stress, renovation arguments. Now she wondered what they'd actually been discussing, whether the plan had already been in motion. She remembered something else from that day. Todd's laptop had been open on the kitchen counter, an insurance website visible on the screen. Jamie had closed it quickly, said something about shopping for better car coverage. Mira hadn't thought twice about it. The evening bonfire was listed as optional on the itinerary, but Mira went anyway. Safer to be visible, to blend in, to seem like someone having a normal weekend. She grabbed a fleece jacket and followed the trail marked by solar lights. A dozen guests clustered around the fire pit, couples mostly, a few solo travelers. The lodge manager, tall, gray-bearded, named Hank according to his vest, was roasting marshmallows and telling a story about a moose that once wandered into the dining hall. Mira took a seat on one of the log benches, scanning faces. No one looked suspicious. No one looked like they'd been paid to push her off a cliff. She felt ridiculous and terrified in equal measure. A woman across the fire smiled at her, raised a mug in greeting. Mira smiled back, wondering if that woman had sisters, if they loved each other the normal way. First time here? The voice came from her left. A man about her age, dark hair, wire-rimmed glasses, holding a mug of something that steamed. He looked tired in a way that felt familiar, like he'd been running on fumes and obligation for longer than he cared to admit. Yeah, Mira said. You? Second. My sister booked it last year and I didn't hate it, so she booked it again this year. Family guilt trip disguised as vacation. He smiled, wry. I'm Paul. Mira. Let me guess, also a family gift? Something like that. Paul laughed softly. My sister even packed my toiletries this time. I opened my bag and found a whole travel kit I didn't pack. She thinks I'm incapable of self-care, which fair, but still. Mira's pulse spiked. She packed for you? Just some extras. Toothpaste, shampoo, that kind of thing. Why? No reason. Mira stared into the fire, trying to keep her voice even. Did she give you anything else? Paperwork, schedules, documents? Paul shook his head. Just the check-in itinerary, and like 15 texts reminding me to actually show up. He took a sip of his drink. You okay? You seem tense. Long week. I hear that. Paul gestured toward the fire. Hank's about to break out the acoustic guitar. Fair warning, he only knows 3 songs and they're all James Taylor. Mira smiled despite herself. Good to know. They sat in silence for a while, listening to Hank transition from moose stories to a somewhat painful rendition of Fire and Rain. Other guests joined in on the chorus, off-key but enthusiastic. Mira watched them, these strangers singing together like they didn't have sisters who might want them dead, and felt a sharp ache of envy. Paul leaned closer, lowering his voice. Seriously, though, you seem really on edge. If something's wrong, I'm fine, Mira said quickly, too quickly. Just adjusting to the whole no-cell service thing. Paul studied her for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, it's weird at first, but it grows on you. Forces you to actually be present. He paused. Or makes you realize how much you use your phone to avoid being present. Either way. Mira excused herself after another song, said she was tired, walked back to the cabin under a sky so full of stars it felt accusatory. Look how beautiful everything is, the stars seemed to say. How can you be suspicious on a night like this? Inside, she locked the door, wedged a chair under the handle, and checked the vitamins Jamie had packed in her duffel. The bottle looked normal, same brand Mira usually bought, seal intact. But she tossed it in the trash anyway, along with the protein bars, the herbal tea, the kind bars, anything her sister had touched. She made herself a cup of instant coffee from the cabin supplies, sat at the table, and opened her laptop again. Still no Wi-Fi, but she could work offline. She opened a spreadsheet and started building a financial model. If Jamie and Todd were $500,000 in debt, mortgage, renovation loans, credit cards, and facing foreclosure, what would $1 million payout mean? She plugged in estimated interest rates, monthly payments, the current real estate market in their area. The math was clear. With that money, they could pay off everything, sell the house at a profit, start over clean. All they needed was for Mira to die. At 11, she heard footsteps on the porch. She froze in bed, covers pulled to her chin, listening. The steps were slow, deliberate, stopping just outside her door. A shadow. Past the window, blocking the moonlight for 3 seconds. Then nothing. Mira waited, breath held, counting. At 5 minutes, she heard the steps again, moving around the side of the cabin toward the back window. Testing, checking. She didn't move. Her phone was still disassembled on the nightstand, useless. The butter knife from the kitchenette was on the table 6 feet away. The chair was still wedged under the door handle, but the back window had no lock, just a latch that could probably be jimmied open with a screwdriver. At 20 minutes, the footsteps retreated. Mira waited another 10, then crept to the window and peered through the curtain. The porch was empty, but the door handle was wet, like someone had gripped it with a damp hand. She touched the window glass, cold, and on the outside at eye level, a smudge, a fingerprint. She didn't sleep. Instead, she sat at the table with her laptop, the butter knife beside her, scrolling through photos of the policy, doing the math. If she died in the next 6 months, accident, illness, anything that didn't scream murder, the insurer would contest, but probably pay. Life insurance companies avoided lawsuits. They'd rather settle than go to court and risk a jury trial. Jamie and Todd would walk away with enough to clear their debts and start over. All Mira had to do was die quietly. At 3 a.m, sitting in the dark with only the glow of her laptop screen, Mira made a decision. She wouldn't run. Not yet. Running without proof would make her look unstable, paranoid, the way Jamie had called her after the divorce. You're seeing betrayal everywhere. Not everyone is Dan. No, she needed evidence, she needed intent, and she needed to stay alive long enough to get it. She opened a new document and started typing, a record, a timeline, every suspicious moment, every strange comment, every piece of evidence. If something happened to her this weekend, at least there would be a trail. She saved it to 3 different locations, laptop, USB drive, email draft, and set her laptop to autosave every 60 seconds. At 4:30, exhausted but too wired to sleep, she finally lay down on the bed, fully clothed, shoes still on, butter knife under her pillow. Through the window, the sky was starting to lighten at the edges, turning from black to deep blue. The loons called again, that lonely sound, and Mira thought about how they mate for life, wondered if they ever regretted it. Morning came with a knock on the door that made Mira's heart stop. She sat up, disoriented, still dressed, the butter knife clattering to the floor. Another knock. "Morning! Yoga starts in 15 minutes. Bryn's voice, cheerful, oblivious. Mira stood, her body stiff from sleeping in her clothes, and opened the door a crack. "I'll be there." "Great. It's mandatory, part of the wellness package. We do it every morning on the back deck. You'll love it." Mira wanted to say she hadn't slept. That yoga sounded like a convenient way to make someone twist into a vulnerable position. That mandatory was an interesting word choice for a retreat supposedly about freedom and relaxation. Instead, she said, "Sounds perfect." She changed quickly, splashed water on her face, reassembled her phone and powered it on, long enough to check for messages. 3 texts from Jamie, all sent after midnight. "Sleep well. Can't wait to hear about your first day. You're probably already asleep, but just wanted to say I love you." The last one made Mira's stomach turn. She powered the phone off again, pocketed it, and headed to the lodge. The yoga session was held on the lodge's back deck, overlooking the lake. 8 guests on rented mats, breathing in unison while an instructor named Simone, blonde, serene, probably 25, guided them through sun salutations. Mira kept her eyes open during Savasana, watching the tree line for movement, counting the other guests, noting exits. Simone's voice floated over them, soft and rhythmic. "Let go of what no longer serves you. Trust the process. Breathe into the discomfort." Mira thought, the process is trying to kill me. Paul was 2 mats over, looking about as comfortable with downward dog as Mira felt. When Simone walked past to adjust someone's posture, he caught Mira's eye and made a subtle face. Not quite eye-rolling, but close. It was such a normal gesture, so human, that Mira felt a sudden rush of gratitude for this stranger, who had no idea he was the only person here she might be able to trust. After class, Simone gathered them in a circle for announcements. "This afternoon we have our lake hike to the overlook. It's one of the highlights of the weekend. Stunning views of the water and mountains. But please everyone, stay on the marked path. The cliffs are unstable and we've had rock slides this season. Safety first. She smiled radiant. Also, tonight is our community dinner. We encourage everyone to share something they're grateful for. It's such a beautiful way to connect. Mira's stomach clenched. A hike with unstable cliffs. Perfect. She skipped breakfast. The lodge dining room felt too exposed, too many eyes, and went back to the cabin. The insurance folder was still on the table where she'd left it. She checked her suitcase. Everything looked normal at first, but then she noticed her clothes were refolded differently. She always folded her jeans with the waistband on the left. These were folded with the waistband on the right. Someone had been in her cabin. She checked the bathroom. Her toiletries were rearranged. Toothbrush moved from the right side of the sink to the left. She opened her makeup bag. The zipper was on the wrong side. Small things. Things most people wouldn't notice. But Mira had been living alone for 8 months, hypervigilant after Dan's betrayal, and she noticed everything. Her phone. She grabbed it from her pocket, powered it on, scrolled to her photos. Still there, all of them. But when she checked the timestamps, her hands started shaking. Someone had looked at the photos 20 minutes ago, while she was at yoga, while her phone was supposed to be off, which meant someone had her passcode. She sat on the bed trying to think. Her passcode was her birthday, month and day, 4 digits. Jamie knew it, had known it for years, ever since Mira had locked herself out of her phone at a family dinner and Jamie had helped her reset it. Mira had never changed it. She changed it now. New passcode, random, nothing personal, numbers she'd have to write down to remember. Then she checked the rest of her phone. Email, nothing unusual. Texts, nothing new. But in her settings, she found it. Location services had been turned back on. She'd disabled them last night. Someone had reactivated them. Mira grabbed her purse, the insurance folder, and walked quickly to the lodge. Bryn was at the desk typing. "Hi, how was yoga?" "Great," Mira lied. "Hey, does housekeeping come to the cabins daily?" "Oh, no. Just on checkout day. Why?" "Just curious. So no one should be going in the cabins during the day?" Bryn's smile faltered. "No, not unless there's a maintenance issue. Is something wrong?" "No, everything's fine." Mira walked away before Bryn could ask more questions. She found Paul at the craft workshop, gratitude journals, because irony was apparently the lodge's theme. He was gluing pressed flowers onto cardstock, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. An older woman beside him was telling him about her grandchildren in excruciating detail. "Hey," Mira said quietly, sitting in the empty chair on his other side. "Can I ask you something weird?" "Weird is pretty much my baseline this weekend." Paul set down his glue stick, lowered his voice. "What's up?" "Did your sister give you any paperwork? Insurance stuff? Legal documents, anything like that?" Paul looked confused. "No, just the itinerary and a list of suggested packing items. Why?" Mira hesitated. She'd met this man less than 24 hours ago, but he was the only person here who wasn't connected to Jamie, and her options were narrowing. The older woman was still talking, oblivious, something about her grandson's soccer tournament. "I think my sister is trying to kill me." Paul's hands went still. The woman beside him kept talking. Paul turned in his chair, gave Mira his full attention. "That's not weird. That's terrifying. I found a life insurance policy in my welcome folder. I didn't sign for it, but someone forged my signature. My sister is the beneficiary. $1.2 million. Paul's face shifted, belief settling in where skepticism might have lived. "Show me." Mira pulled out her phone, opened the photos, handed it over. Paul scrolled in silence, his jaw tightening. The older woman finally noticed they weren't listening, huffed, and moved to another table. Paul zoomed in on the forged signature, then the highlighted accidental death rider. When he looked up, his voice was low. "You need to leave, right now." "I can't prove intent, not yet. And if I run without more evidence, she'll say I'm paranoid, that I'm unstable. My ex-husband already painted me that way during our divorce. I can't." Mira's voice cracked slightly. She steadied it. "I need more than just the policy." "She forged your signature on $1 million policy. That's fraud. That's intent." "It's my word against hers, unless I have documentation of motive. Unless I can prove they knew I didn't consent." Mira glanced toward the window. "The hike is at noon. If something's going to happen, it'll be there. Cliffs, unstable ground, Easy to make it look like an accident. Paul stared at her. So, you're going to go? On the hike where you think someone might push you off a cliff? I'm going to be visible, in a group. If I hide in my cabin, I'm alone. At least on the trail there are witnesses. Mira met his eyes. But I need you to walk near me, please. I know I sound crazy, but you don't sound crazy. Paul's voice was firm. You sound like someone whose sister forged a life insurance policy. That's not crazy. That's reasonable fear. He paused. I'll stay close. But we leave right after the hike. I brought my own car, didn't trust the shuttle schedule. We go straight to the police in Bellport. Mira exhaled, a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Deal. And if anyone tries anything on that trail, I mean anything, we make a scene, loud, public. Okay. Paul reached over and squeezed her hand briefly, a gesture so simple and kind that Mira felt her eyes burn. We'll get through this. You're not alone. The lake trail was beautiful in the way dangerous things often are. Tall pines, moss-covered rocks, the sound of water moving somewhere below. Hank led the group, all 8 weekend guests plus Simone and a young guy named Marcus, who Mira vaguely remembered from breakfast, talking about his degree in environmental science. They walked in a loose cluster, Hank pointing out bird species and warning them about poison ivy. Mira stayed in the middle of the pack, Paul beside her, her pulse a steady drumbeat in her ears. The trail wound upward gradually, the lake appearing and disappearing through the trees. Marcus was explaining something about erosion patterns to an older couple who seemed genuinely interested. Simone walked near the back, calling out reminders to stay hydrated. Everything felt so normal, so safe. Except Mira's phone was buzzing in her pocket. She'd turned it back on before the hike, worried about missing something important. 4 texts from Jamie in the last 10 minutes. How's your morning? Tried calling, but no service probably. Hope you're enjoying the hike. Be careful on those cliffs, I heard they're pretty high. That last one made Mira's blood run cold. She hadn't mentioned the hike. The itinerary Jamie had received wouldn't have listed specific activities, which meant Jamie was here, or had someone watching. Paul noticed her stop walking. What? Mira showed him the texts. Paul's expression darkened. She knows about the hike. Yeah? Okay, new plan. We don't go to the overlook. We turn around right now. If we leave the group, we're more vulnerable, easier targets. Mira looked ahead at the trail. We stay in the middle. We don't get close to any edges. They reached the overlook, a granite shelf jutting out over the water. No railings, just open sky and a 60-foot drop to rocks and shallow water below. The group spread out, taking photos, leaning carefully toward the edge to see the view. Hank was explaining the geological formations, something about glacial activity 10,000 years ago. Simone was taking selfies with the older couple. Mira hung back with Paul, staying a good 15 feet from the edge. That's when she saw it. In the gravel parking lot below, barely visible through the trees, was a silver SUV. Main plates, Todd's car. Her breath caught. Paul followed her gaze, then looked back at her. Is that my brother-in-law? He wasn't supposed to arrive until Sunday pickup. Paul's hand found her elbow. We leave. Now. Wait. Mira pulled out her phone, zoomed in, took 3 photos of the SUV. The license plate was visible in one shot. Then she noticed something else. Movement near the trailhead below. A figure in a dark jacket. Too far to see clearly, but the shape was familiar. The way they stood, weight shifted to one hip. Jamie. Mira's hands started shaking. She took 2 more photos, the zoom making the image grainy but still identifiable. Jamie was talking to someone, Marcus, the environmental science guy from the hike. He was nodding, gesturing back toward the trail. Mira. Paul's voice was urgent. We need to go. They slipped away from the group while Hank was deep in his glacier lecture. Back down the trail, moving quickly but trying not to run, trying not to look like people fleeing. Behind them, Hank's voice. And if you look to the north, you can see where the second ice age. They were 50 yards down the trail when Mira heard footsteps behind them. Fast, gaining. Don't run, Paul said quietly. Just walk normal. The footsteps got closer. Mira's heart hammered. She glanced back, Marcus jogging down the trail toward them. Hey, he called. Wait up. Paul positioned himself slightly between Mira and Marcus. What's up? Marcus jogged up, slightly out of breath, smiling. Simone wanted me to check on you guys. Make sure you're okay. You left pretty quickly. Just feeling a bit tired, Mira said. Didn't sleep well. Oh, totally get that. The first night here can be rough. Different sounds, you know? Marcus gestured back up the trail. You guys want company walking back? I was going to head down anyway. Already saw the overlook last year. We're good, Paul said. You sure? It's pretty easy to get turned around on these trails. We're following the markers. We'll be fine. Marcus hesitated, his smile wavering. Okay, well, if you change your mind. He jogged back up the trail, disappeared around a bend. Paul and Mira walked faster. At the cabin, Mira shoved clothes into her duffel with shaking hands. Paul stood by the door, watching the path. Hurry. She grabbed the insurance folder, her phone, her wallet, her laptop. Everything else could stay. As she zipped the bag, she glanced out the window and saw Jamie walking toward the lodge office with a man in a resort uniform, not Marcus, someone older, maybe maintenance staff. Through the glass, Jamie handed him an envelope. The man opened it, thumbed through what looked like cash, several bills, and nodded. They talked for another minute, Jamie gesturing toward the cabins, the man listening carefully. Then Jamie handed him something else. Too small to see clearly, but it looked like a key. Mira's heart stopped. She lifted her phone, zoomed in, took 3 photos. The angle wasn't perfect, but the exchange was clear. Cash, key, instructions. We need to go, Paul said from the doorway. Mira tucked her phone into her bra, safest place she could think of, hardest to grab quickly, grabbed her purse and followed him out the back door. His truck was parked near the service road, a dusty blue Subaru with Massachusetts plates and a coexist bumper sticker. It started on the first try. They pulled out slowly, trying not to draw attention, gravel crunching under the tires. But as they reached the main driveway, Jamie stepped into the road, waving, smiling. Paul braked. Mira's hands clenched in her lap. Jamie walked toward the passenger window, still smiling, and Mira realized her sister didn't know she'd been caught. She still thought this was a birthday gift gone slightly wrong, a misunderstanding she could smooth over with the right words. Or maybe she was that good an actress. Either way, that smile was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. Jamie tapped on the window. Mira, where are you going? Mira didn't roll down the window. She looked at Jamie through the glass, memorizing that smile, the concern that might have been real or might have been perfectly calibrated, and then turned to Paul. Drive. Mira! Jamie's voice muffled. Come on, talk to me. Paul accelerated. In the rearview mirror, Jamie's smile faded as Todd emerged from the lodge, phone pressed to his ear, his expression sharp with something that looked like panic. He started jogging toward his SUV. He's following us, Paul said. I know, just get to town. Public place. Witnesses. Paul drove faster, taking the curves of the access road with practiced ease. Mira twisted in her seat, watching through the back window. Todd's SUV pulled out behind them, closing the distance. How far to Bellport? Mira asked. 25 minutes, maybe less if I push it. Push it. Paul drove in silence for the first 10 minutes, hands tight on the wheel, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds. Todd's SUV had dropped back, but was still visible, maintaining distance like a predator pacing its prey. The road wound through dense forest, no other cars, no houses, just trees and the occasional flash of lake through the branches. He's still there, Paul said. I know. Mira's phone buzzed. Text from Jamie. Please talk to me. You're scaring me. Another buzz. Whatever you think is happening, you're wrong. Another. Todd says you're being paranoid again, like after the divorce. Let's just talk. The gaslighting landed like a slap. Mira remembered Jamie's constant refrain after the split. You're seeing betrayal everywhere. Not everyone is Dan. You need to stop assuming the worst in people. At the time, Mira had half believed her. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe Dan's affair had broken something in her ability to trust. But now, staring at those texts with a forged insurance policy in her bag and Todd's SUV in the rearview mirror, she understood. Jamie had been conditioning her, planting seeds, making sure that if Mira ever suspected anything, she'd doubt herself first. You okay? Paul asked. No. Mira powered off her phone completely. But I will be. They passed a sign, Bellport, 18 miles. Paul accelerated slightly. Behind them, Todd matched the speed. They drove past a closed farm stand, a Methodist church with a gravel parking lot, a historical marker about some Revolutionary War skirmish. Everything looked so normal, so safe, and Mira thought about how horror always happened in places like this. Pretty places, quiet places where people went to feel peaceful. There, Paul pointed ahead. A diner, neon sign flickering in the afternoon light, a handful of cars in the lot. Public place. We stopped there first, then police. He pulled in, parked near the entrance under a security camera. Todd's SUV slowed as it passed, then kept going, disappearing around a bend. Mira watched until she couldn't see it anymore. Inside, the diner smelled like coffee and fryer grease. A waitress with kind eyes and a name tag reading Deb led them to a booth by the window. Mira ordered coffee she wouldn't drink. Paul ordered the same. When Deb walked away, Mira pulled out her phone, powered it on, waited for it to connect to the diner's Wi-Fi. "What are you looking for?" Paul asked. Proof of motive." Mira logged into her bank account, the one she'd had since before the marriage, the one that was just hers. Her hands went cold. There was a new joint account listed under her profile. Opened 3 weeks ago. Co-signers, Mira Hollins and Todd Reed. Balance, $18,000. She clicked into the transaction history. One deposit dated November 1st. Source, Pine Valley Credit Union. Memo, personal loan disbursement. She traced the deposit, fingers shaking slightly on the screen. Opened another tab, searched for Pine Valley Credit Union loan products. Found it buried in the fine print of their life insurance loan program. Borrow against your life insurance policy's death benefit. Competitive. Rates. Fast approval. Her stomach dropped. They hadn't just taken out a policy on her life. They'd already borrowed against her death. $18,000 they'd never have to pay back if she died within the next 6 months. "Oh my God," she whispered. Paul leaned across the table. "What?" Mira turned the phone toward him. He read in silence, his face going pale. "They took out a loan. Using my death as collateral. Yeah." Mira's voice was flat, mechanical, the way it got when she was doing damage control at work, calculating the fallout from a bad investment. "If I die, the insurance pays the loan automatically. They walk away with the remaining balance, about $1 million after debts. That's premeditation. That's, Jesus, Mira, that's attempted murder." "Not yet. Attempted requires an actual attempt. Right now it's just fraud and conspiracy." She closed her eyes, pressed her palms against them. "But it will be. If I hadn't found that folder, if I'd gone on that hike alone, gotten too close to the edge, slipped on some conveniently loose rocks." "Stop." Paul's hand covered hers on the table. "You didn't. You found it. You're here." Mira opened her eyes. Deb was bringing their coffee, setting it down with a smile that was just doing her job friendly, oblivious to the fact that she was serving coffee to someone whose family had taken out a hit on her using a life insurance policy and a gravel trail. When Deb left, Mira pulled up her email on her phone, scrolled through 3 weeks of messages she'd been too busy to read carefully. Found it. An automated confirmation from Granite State Life Insurance, CCing her, Jamie, and Todd. Subject line, policy activation and accidental death rider, per your request. She'd seen it the day it arrived, skimmed it, assumed it was spam or a phishing attempt, deleted it. But deleted emails went to trash, and trash took 30 days to purge. She recovered it, screenshot everything, then opened her photos. Found the images from the overlook, Todd's car in the parking lot, Jamie talking to Marcus, Jamie handing cash to the resort staffer. She zoomed in on that last one. The bills were visible now that she was looking on a larger screen. Hundreds. At least 5 of them. "I need to send these to someone," she said, "someone who isn't my family." "Send them to me." Paul pulled out his phone, gave her his number. "And your lawyer if you have one, and the police. Just flood the zone with evidence so it exists in multiple places." Mira did. Sent everything to Paul, to her divorce attorney's emergency contact email, to her own work email, to a cloud storage account. Created a new folder labeled Evidence, Jamie Todd with the date. Made it public, copied the link, texted it to her mother with a message. "If something happens to me, open this. Don't tell Jamie I sent it." Her phone rang. Jamie. Mira declined. It rang again. She declined again. Then a text. "I'm at the diner. I can see you through the window. Please come outside." "Let me explain." Mira's blood went cold. She looked up, scanned the parking lot through the window. There, Jamie's sedan, parked 3 spaces from Paul's truck. Jamie in the driver's seat, phone in hand, looking directly at Mira's. "She's here," Mira said. Paul turned, saw Jamie, then turned back to Mira. "We call the police right now." "And say what? My sister is sitting in a parking lot?" "You have evidence of fraud. That's enough." Mira hesitated. She thought about what would happen next. Police reports, investigations. Jamie crying, claiming misunderstanding, blaming everything on Todd. Their mother caught in the middle. Family dinners for the rest of Mira's life with this between them, or no family dinners at all. The math of it, the cost-benefit analysis, the way every choice led to loss. But then she thought about the footsteps on her porch at midnight, the wet door handle, the forged signature, the $18,000 borrowed against her death, and she thought, I don't owe her my silence. "Okay," Mira said. "Let's go to the police." Paul flagged down Deb, asked for directions. Bellport Police Station, 2 blocks east on Main Street, can't miss it. He left cash on the table, $20 for 2 coffees they hadn't touched, and they walked out together. Jamie got out of her car. "Mira, please, 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." "No." Mira kept walking. "I know how this looks, but you don't understand. I understand you forged my signature on a life insurance policy and borrowed against my death. I understand you tried to get me a loan on a cliff trail after paying someone at the lodge. I understand everything, Jamie." Jamie's face crumpled. Or seemed to. Mira couldn't tell anymore what was real and what was performance. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. We're drowning, Mira. The house, the loans, everything. Todd said this was a way to protect you, to make sure you had coverage, and then we could borrow a little just to get through the renovation." "Stop." Mira's voice was quiet but hard. "Don't insult me by pretending this was for my protection. You tried to kill me." "I would never." Jamie reached out, tried to grab Mira's arm. Paul stepped between them. "Don't touch her." Jamie looked at Paul like she was just now noticing him. "Who are you?" "Someone who actually cares if she lives through the weekend." Todd's SUV pulled into the lot. He got out, walked toward them with his hands up like he was approaching a scared animal. "Hey, everyone just calm down. Mira, let's talk about this rationally." "Rationally?" Mira laughed, sharp and bitter. "You want to talk rationally about the fact that you forged my signature, took out $1 million policy, borrowed against it, and then sent me to an isolated lodge with unstable cliffs? What's the rational explanation, Todd?" "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." Todd glanced at Jamie, then back at Mira. His jaw worked. For a moment, like he was calculating angles, deciding which story would work best. "We were trying to help you. After the divorce, you had no life insurance, no protection. You thought you'd forge my signature? You thought you'd take out a loan I didn't consent to?" "We were going to tell you. We just needed to get through this rough patch first, and then..." "And then what? I'd die conveniently in an accident and you'd collect?" Mira's voice rose. "You think I'm stupid? You think I can't do the math?" A car pulled into the lot, an older couple heading into the diner. They glanced at the group, sensing conflict, and hurried inside. Witnesses, Mira thought. Good. Jamie was crying now, or pretending to. Mira had seen her sister cry at their father's funeral, real tears, gut-wrenching grief. This wasn't that. This was strategic, calculated, the kind of crying that was meant to make other people uncomfortable enough to back down. "I'm going to the police," Mira said. "You can explain it to them." "Please don't do this." Jamie's voice broke. "You'll destroy our lives. You tried to destroy mine. We're family." Mira looked at her sister, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. Jamie had always been the charismatic one, the one who could talk her way into anything, out of anything, the one their mother defended with "she means well, and she's just going through a hard time." And Mira had always been the responsible one, the one who cleaned up messes, who lent money she'd never get back, who swallowed her hurt because keeping the peace was easier than rocking the boat. Not anymore. "No," Mira said quietly. "Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't take out loans against your death. Family doesn't send you to isolated retreats and pay people to help stage accidents." She took a breath. "You stopped being my family the moment you decided I was worth more dead than alive." She turned and walked toward Paul's truck. Behind her, Jamie called her name, voice desperate now, unraveling. Todd said something sharp, too low to hear. Mira didn't look back. Paul unlocked the truck and they got in. Police station? He asked. Police station? The Bellport police station was small, clean, smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner. The officer at the desk, name tag reading Sergeant Chen, listened to Mira's story with the careful attention of someone who'd heard a lot of family disputes and knew to take them seriously. She showed him everything: the forged policy, the loan documents, the photos, the emails, the timeline. Chen took notes, asked questions, made copies of everything. This is enough for fraud charges at minimum. Forgery, identity theft, potentially conspiracy. I'll need to bring them in for questioning. They're at the diner 2 blocks west, Mira said. Silver sedan and a silver SUV. My sister is Jamie Reed. My brother-in-law is Todd Reed. Chen nodded, made a call, sent 2 officers. Mira sat in the waiting area with Paul, hands shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. Paul brought her water from the cooler. She drank it without tasting it. An hour later, Chen came back. We've got them. They're being questioned separately. You'll need to make a formal statement, and we'll be in touch about next steps. You have somewhere safe to stay? I can go to my mother's. Do that. And Ms. Hollins? Chen's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry this happened. Family stuff is always the hardest. Mira nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in her throat. Outside, the sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Paul drove her to her mother's house, 40 minutes south, a small ranch with yellow siding and a garden her mother actually maintained, unlike Jamie's yard of dead plans and good intentions. Her mother's car was in the driveway. Mira had called from the police station, said only that she needed to come over, that it was important. Now, standing on the porch with her duffel bag and the insurance folder, Mira felt like she was 7 years old again, coming home after falling off her bike, knees scraped, needing her mother to fix everything. Except some things couldn't be fixed. Her mother opened the door, took one look at Mira's face, and pulled her inside. Paul carried her bag in, set it by the door. I can stay if you need. No, Mira's mother said firmly, but thank you for keeping her safe. Paul looked at Mira. Call me if you need anything. I mean it. I will. Thank you. He left. Mira sat at her mother's kitchen table, the same table where she'd done homework as a kid, where they'd had countless family dinners, where Jamie had announced her engagement to Todd 5 years ago. Her mother made tea, chamomile that Mira wouldn't drink, and sat down across from her. Tell me, she said. Mira told her. Everything. The policy, the forgery, the loan, the retreat, the cliff trail, the cash payment to the lodge staffer. Her mother's face went through a progression of emotions: disbelief, horror, anger, grief, before settling into something harder. Resignation, maybe, or determination. When Mira finished, her mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Jamie and Todd came to me last month, asked me to co-sign a loan. $50,000, said they needed it to finish the house, that they'd sell within 6 months and pay it back. I said no. You did? I said no because they'd already borrowed from me twice and paid back nothing. I told them they needed to stop spending money they didn't have. Her mother's voice cracked. I didn't know they'd go after you instead. Mom, I should have warned you, should have told you they were desperate, but I thought... She closed her eyes. I thought I was protecting Jamie by keeping it private, protecting the family. This isn't your fault. It's not yours either. Her mother reached across the table, took Mira's hands. You did the right thing. Going to the police, not letting them... She couldn't finish the sentence. They sat in silence, holding hands across the table, while the sky outside darkened and the tea went cold. Jamie and Todd were arrested 2 days later, charged with fraud, forgery, identity theft, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. The district attorney was considering adding attempted murder, but that charge was harder to prove without a clear attempt. The loan, the policy, the retreat, it all added up to intent, but intent wasn't the same as action. Not legally. Mira didn't go to the arraignment. She stayed at her mother's house, fielding calls from her divorce attorney, who was now recommending a criminal attorney, from her bank about the fraudulent account, from the insurance company about canceling the policy. She changed all her passwords, froze her credit, set up fraud alerts. Paperwork and protocols, things she could control. On the third day, her mother asked, "What do you need?" Mira thought about it. "I need to not be afraid anymore." "Then what does that look like?" "I don't know yet." But slowly over the next week, she figured it out. It looked like deleting Jamie's number from her phone. It looked like telling her mother she wasn't ready to talk about forgiveness, and her mother respecting that. It looked like going back to work and telling her boss she needed to take some time off, not because she was falling apart, but because she was putting herself back together. It looked like calling Paul and thanking him properly over coffee at a different diner, one that didn't have associations with the worst weekend of her life. He told her about his sister, the one who booked the retreat, and how she meant well but didn't understand boundaries. They laughed about mandatory yoga and gratitude journals, and it felt normal, easy, the kind of conversation Mira had forgotten how to have. It looked like signing up for a ceramics class at the community center, something she'd always wanted to try but never made time for, and looking at dog adoption websites late at night, not quite ready to commit but wanting something to care for that would care for her back, uncomplicated. 2 weeks after the arrests, Mira drove back to Bellport. Not to the lodge, she'd never go back there, but to the overlook, accessed from a different trailhead on public land. She parked in the empty lot, walked the trail alone, emerged at the granite shelf where she'd seen Todd's car, where Jamie had been waiting. The view was beautiful, water and mountains and sky. She stood at the edge, not too close, but close enough, and looked down. 60 feet, high enough to kill, high enough that one push, one moment of trust betrayed, and she wouldn't have seen her 39th birthday. But she was here. Standing, breathing, alive. She thought about the insurance folder, the one she'd ripped in half and thrown away at a rest stop on the drive home from her mother's. How it had felt like, tearing up more than paper, tearing up the version of herself who would have accepted Jamie's explanation, who would have prioritized family peace over her own survival. That version was gone, and Mira didn't miss her. She stood at the overlook until the sun started to set, painting the sky in colors that didn't care about human drama, human betrayal, human survival. Then she walked back down the trail, got in her car, and drove home. Not to her mother's, but to her own apartment, the one she'd rented after the divorce, the one that was just hers. On the passenger seat was the welcome basket from the lodge, still unopened. Lavender soap, honey, a blank journal with a cover that said gratitude. She'd drop it at the shelter tomorrow. Someone else could use it. Someone else could fill that journal with things they were grateful for. Mira pulled into her parking space, turned off the engine, sat in the quiet. Through the windshield, she could see her apartment window on the second floor, light on because she'd left it on that morning, a marker that said someone lives here, someone is coming back. She thought about calling her mother, telling her she was home safe. She would, in a minute. First, she just wanted to sit here in her car, in the dark, listening to the sound of her own breathing. Steady, present, alive. She got out, locked the door, walked up the stairs with her keys already in her hand. Inside, the apartment was exactly as she'd left it. Small, tidy hers. She set her purse on the counter, poured herself a glass of water, drank it standing at the sink. Tomorrow she'd call the ceramics place, confirm her enrollment. Tomorrow she'd look at dogs, maybe visit a shelter. Tomorrow she'd figure out what came next. Tonight she was just going to be here, in her space, safe. Choosing herself first, not out of fear, but out of something newer, stronger. Something that felt like the beginning of living instead of just surviving. She turned off the light and went to bed, windows open, city sounds drifting in, and for the first time in weeks, she slept through the night.